Welcome again, everyone, to Gabbing About Gardening. Today, we're gabbing about growing lavender with Judy Kemchand, who manages the lavender farm, beautiful lavender farm on Cortes Island. Judy is going to present a fabulous PowerPoint, and then we're going to have lots of time for questions. If you have any questions in the chat box, please do pop them in there. It looks like when I started the record, I lost what was in the chat box. So I'm so sorry about that. I don't know how that happened. So right now, if you have any questions that you had already put in the chat box, please do it again. I had a technical glitch, and we'd really like to see your questions. I'll read them out to Judy a little later. We are coming to you. Judy and I are both on Cortes Island today. It's beautifully sunny here. And just reminding you that Gabbing About Gardening is based on the gift economy, and you're invited to contribute. I will post the email address for e-transfers. And Judy, thank you so much for coming in out of your garden, coming in from your lavender fields. I want to get you on as co-host so you can share with us now.
Okay.
And you should have the power to screen share now. How is that working for you?
Okay, I think I do. So, we'll get the PowerPoint started. And yeah, so if we're ready, are we ready to go, Lou?
We're ready. Let's see your gorgeous pictures you put together.
Okay. So, hi everyone. Thank you for being here. So we'll get started. Today we're going to talk a little bit about growing lavender, all the different aspects of it, and we're going to start with a little bit about the history of lavender. So I became interested, really interested in lavender in 2013 when I met the owner of the current farm here. And I had a lot to learn. So I'm not sure if many of you noticed, but right across the Washington state, right across the border from us, there are lots of lavender farms there. And they're really set up to accommodate visitors. You take the ferry across, and there are tour buses in the parking lot. So you can get on the bus, you can go do a tour for the day, and then return back to the parking lot. I would highly recommend it if people are really into learning about lavender and seeing all the different farms. It'll be a wonderful, well-spent day. Here in the northern Gulf Islands, lavender grows well, but we only get one major crop of flowering. Sometimes we might get a second flush in early October with a hard pruning, but we're not so lucky as the folks a little bit further down south. So a couple years ago, I attended a conference in Oregon and was told that growing lavender is not rocket science, but it can be just as challenging and rewarding. Hopefully after this presentation, those of you who are not so familiar with lavender, hopefully you'll be joining our Let's All Love Lavender Club.
And okay. Judy, just to clarify quickly, you haven't actually started the screen share yet, have you?
I think I did. Did I not?
No, it hasn't started yet.
Okay, hold on. Okay. I thought I did. I am so sorry.
That's okay. I thought we were still introing, which is great because we're up to 86 people here to hear about growing lavender.
Okay. Sorry, Lou. I'm on board now. I'm
all right.
On board.
Yay.
Okay. Okay. So we start over. How's that? Can you see?
We have
yes we can.
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm new to Zoom, and Lou and I had a lot of glitches getting me going. So if something's not going right, just feel free to let me know, and hopefully we'll get back on course. Okay.
Sounds great, Judy.
All right. So back to the history of lavender a little bit. The botanical name is derived from the Latin verb lavar or lavare, meaning to wash. Lavender grows naturally in the Mediterranean region, extending all the way east as far as India. And the first recorded use of lavender dates back to the Greek and Roman times. Egyptians used it for mummification and as a perfume as well. And I already spoke about the farms in Washington. So this is just a slide of the ferry during my visit and one of the farms there. They're just beautifully set up. And they were caught up now to the history of lavender. So the farms are set up with really nice, they've got like vendor booths, arts and crafts. They give educational tours, demonstrations about growing, harvesting, distilling, everything lavender associated. Okay, so moving on. We're going to touch briefly about growing lavender around the world because there are some big farms in a lot of different areas. This slide my son put together for me. It's some of the pictures of the larger farms.
And Judy,
Yeah,
sorry to interrupt, but we're getting a request. Are you able to hit slideshow and get the larger?
get it bigger?
Picture?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can certainly do that. How's that?
That's good.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Sorry. Okay, so a little bit about commercial lavender growing. Some of the largest lavender farms are in Australia, and they started as early as 1894. And these farms were set up by the government for the establishment of the perfume industry. Then we have France. Lavender grows wild in France on the sunny hills of Provence. The commercial crop of lavender, which is actually the French lavender called lavandin, started around the 1920s. And the lavandins are a much bigger plant. They're what people commonly refer to as long stem lavender. And they actually have a higher oil content yield than the traditional English varieties. Then we move on to Japan. They started around 1937 for the perfume industry as well. And then the plants became very popular in gardens and different forms of landscape. We have New Zealand. It's believed that the lavender seed was brought over by the English settlers in the 1800s. And their industry developed more into a dried lavender industry. And apparently New Zealand has the ideal climate for growing lavender. And we have England. Lavender became popular after it was cultivated by the Benedictine monks in their monastery gardens. Commercial growing started around 1770 with crops for the Yardley perfume industry. And then we have us, North America. So lavender's been cultivated here since around the 1900s, but in the past 40 or 50 years, interest has grown with public awareness of the many uses of the plant and the oil for medicinal, culinary, other things, what have you. And then we have our little Cortes Island, 2013. I just had to put that in there. We don't really compare to the bigger farms, but we matter. So yeah, we have our little farm on Cortes Island. It was started in 2013, and our lavender field is approximately 3.3 acres. And it's been a challenging project for me from the beginning. I was involved, and it's a combination of reclaiming, gravel pits and healing the land. That's the best way that I can describe it. So, Sharing. So I'm a little
Judy,
bit behind on my,
Judy,
yeah,
Lou here. We're getting a lot of comments that your voice is not coming through loudly and clearly enough
oh, sure.
for everybody. Some people can, but some people can't. I wonder if you can get a little closer to your microphone.
Okay, I can try.
And we talked about the size of the room you were in. You wondered if opening the door would help. It's a little echoey.
Should I open the door?
Oh, there. Go ahead and talk some more.
Well, I'm closer to the computer.
That helps, right,
That
everybody?
helps? Okay, all right.
I think so.
Okay.
We'll find out. We'll
Yeah,
hear in the chat
we'll
room.
find out. Yeah.
Okay, you go, girl.
Okay, so now we move on to the uses of lavender and the essential oil itself. So we have the medicinal uses, which acts as a sleep aid to relieve stress and anxiety. It's used for scenting bath water, which we've all done. This as a general use in the household, you know, like by spraying lavender water in the rooms or leaving the little sachets in your closet. In terms of aromatherapy, used in the perfume industry a lot, soaps and lotions. Lavender hydrosol, which is the byproduct of distillation, is used in the cosmetic and skincare industry a lot. Apparently, it's a great toner for your skin. How is my voice? Is that a little bit better?
It is a little bit improved. It's still kind of muffled, but I think now that we know, we'll work on it for next time, Judy. We'll just do the best we can under the circumstances.
All right. So
the information is fabulous, though. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, where were we? Oh yeah, so culinary. English lavender, mainly used for culinary. The French, not so much. You can do lavender teas. It's used for flavoring wines, vinegar, for baking, cookies, cakes, confectionery. I've had a lavender truffle, which is really good. Lavender infused honey, lavender lemonade, one of my favorites. Really refreshing on a hot summer day. Pot of gin optional. So dried lavender, also used as a decoration in terms of wreaths, sachets, just anything you want to do with it, leave it in the room somewhere. Okay, so that's just a lavender lemonade recipe. This is just a picture from one of the farms in Washington of all the products on display. Just beautiful. I had to take that picture. Okay, so now we move on to the more technical aspect, the different types of lavender. So we have 3 types, English, Spanish, and French. There are probably more, but these are the main ones. They range in difference from height, flower color. You can get shades of purple to light blue, dark blue, pink, and white. The English lavender, which is the most familiar and common type found in nurseries, and it's known for the sweet perfumed smell. It's also the earliest flowering variety. Some of the varieties include listed here: Hidcote, Munstead, Sachet, Royal Velvet, Melissa, Silver Frost, and then there are some smaller, newer varieties that are more suited to container gardening, like really small and compact. The Colgate, Blue Cushion are some of those. Then we move on to the French lavender, as I mentioned, also known as lavandin. They are a hybrid. They do not go to seed. And their most distinguishing feature is the long stem. These flower about 2 weeks later than the English varieties. And most of the oil produced and sold on the market is from the French lavender, mainly the first variety up there, the Grosso. So we have all the different varieties listed here, not all, but some of them. Provence, Hidcote Giant, Hidcote White, Super. We have Seal, which I'm told is the biggest lavender plant. Like it will get the biggest and the tallest. And Phenomenal came on the market about 5 or 6 years ago, and it got a really, really deep purple flower. A lot of the farms in Washington are growing it, and a lot of people are pleased with it. It just doesn't like wet at all. Okay. Then we have Spanish lavender. Most of you are probably familiar with this guy. This is not really distilled as much because the scent isn't that great. But a lot of people the Romans use this a lot, like in times of war, for washing wounds. That's a great antiseptic. Okay, a little bit about lavender in the landscape, and that's me, my card on the side there, just cashing in on a little bit of production value. Okay, so this is just some images of lavender in the landscape. So this is just a combination planting. And this is just some of the things you can do with it in the landscape. Great. Creating borders. It's a low maintenance plant, really great for defining pathways. It's gear resistant, which is really good. We need that around here on Cortez. And bees love it. The fragrance of lavender, and it's a great all around companion plant. For those of you who haven't been to a large area with lavender, that nothing compares to like a walk early in the morning when the bees are out. There's this hum that vibrates really deep down inside of you. It's just an amazing thing. I would recommend experiencing that if you haven't. Okay, and this is just for comparison. So there's English on one side and French on the other. So you can probably see the difference a little bit. Now we move on to a little bit about the plant itself. So the English lavender grows to a height of 50 centimeters. Now these are all approximate. It depends on your garden, where you are. Might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less. The English starts blooming about mid-June to July. And if you prune it back really hard, there's like a second flush in October. But they don't quite get to finish because it gets really cold. And because of the rain, the flowers won't open, but still a little bit of color. Height, 50 centimeters, spread 30 to 40. And then we have the French again, which is a hybrid. Height 1 meter. This is with flowers on the spikes. Spread pretty much 1 meter as well, a mature plant after 6 or 7 years. And if you're planting them, the spacing at least 1 meter, or I've gone at least up to 5 or 6 feet apart between plants. And then we have the Spanish lavender down there. I'm not giving Spanish much credit, I'm sorry, but Spanish blooms all through the year. It just keeps going and going. And if you prune it, you get more and more flowers. So it's really good. Okay. This is just a picture of the flower from comparison. This is not my picture. I got this one from a book, but it really shows you the difference between the English flower and the French flower. And a little bit of information on the actual anatomy of the flower. So I'm sure many of you have seen this. This is the English. And oil is found in all parts of the plant, the stems, the leaves, but the flowers, the oil is concentrated in the flowers, and actually the calyx of the flower, that little purple part, is where most of the oil is in the plant. And linalool is the actual chemical compound that gives you that sweet smell in the oil. Okay, a little bit on cultivation and plant care. So lavender plants thrive best in full sun. They like rocky, sandy, obviously well-drained soil. Prefers a pH of between 6 to 8. Very drought tolerant, deer resistant. We talked about that. Hardy from zones 5 to 9. If you are in a wet area and you want to grow lavender, I would recommend making a mound or a berm, because if it gets too wet in the winter and your area holds water, the roots will rot. Or if your soil is heavy clay based, again, the same thing will happen. The Spanish lavender is a little bit more tolerant of acidic soils, so that might actually be easier to grow. But if we get a really cold winter, like with a hard freeze, the Spanish doesn't always survive. Okay, and this is just a picture of a 2-year-old Angustifolia variety Munstead. Pruning. So why do we prune lavender? Definitely for the shape of the plants and the health of the plants. A lot of you have probably seen after a few years, the bush gets really leggy and starts to fall open. So pruning helps to prevent that. It keeps the plant nice and compact. It looks pretty severe, but trust me, it's necessary if you want your plant to last long. For pruning, it's recommended that you cut back at least a third of the bush and the current year's growth. The stem that you have from this year, I would cut back to at least 2 to 2.5 inches of that stem. That's how low you'll cut the whole plant back. Okay. With new plants, the first couple of years, they need watering, and they would benefit from a little bit of compost and lime. But after the plant becomes established, it requires minimal watering, just pretty much in the hot summer months. This is just a picture that I took. It shows you a little bit of a contrast. So on one side, we have the lavender plant in full flower. The second picture is the plant harvested, like the flowers actually cut away. And the third picture is the pruning. And this is just a picture of fall pruning in the field. As you can see, again, we cut away a lot of it. And this pruning can be done anywhere from October to February in our climate. Now we come to propagating lavender, which is very, very easy. So lavender can be propagated from the semi-hardwood cuttings. This can be done outdoors in spring. And the softwood cuttings, if you want to do this, has to be done inside, under light, preferably with heat, a growing mat, and then you'll get roots in about 2 to 3 weeks. You can also layer it by pinning a branch down to the ground with a rock. So take a branch and scrape off some of the bark on the underside, and then pin it down to the ground with a pin or a rock or something. Just make sure it doesn't move about in the wind. And in the next year, you should have roots, and you should be able to cut that branch free from the parent plant. Germination by seeds, that's another way to go, but this only works for the English and the Spanish. Again, the French does not sell seed because it's a hybrid. Moving on. Okay, So this is my little stage photo of propagation, just so you can see like the size. And so you would cut some with here, leave a little bit on, peel off the bottom leaves or stems, put it in a little bit of rooting hormone and put it in a pot. The important thing, if you're using rooting hormone, you dip the plant in the hormone, but then don't stick the plant down into the soil, because that removes all the hormone you just put on. Make a little hole with something and then just gently pat the plant in so you don't remove all the hormone you just put on it. This is just harvesting for bundles. We're moving on to like harvesting and drying. This is commercial drying. So they harvest the lavender. You would make the bundle the size of your, they say the size of your hand, put an elastic on it and hang it up. So hang upside down to dry, no direct sunlight, in a cool place. Make sure you've got good air circulation. And once the lavender is dry, if you want to remove the buds from the stems, you can do so and store it in airtight containment in a cool room, and that will last for up to 2 years or more, and the smell will still be there. A little bit on the oil extraction. So for oil, we distill fresh cut flowers. The flower and the stem gets distilled. Lavender oil is extracted by a steam distillation process. From the distillation, you get the oil and you get hydrosol. Those are the two byproducts of the distillation. And this is just another really nice shot of one of the farms in Washington. This is an example of a distiller. This is a copper distiller. This guy here is a stainless steel distiller. As we move to the bigger farms that have to distill a lot, like hundreds and hundreds of pounds, they use a lot of these stainless steel distillers with, as you can see, there's like a whole heating system set up there to heat the water so it gets going quicker. Bit of a complicated process. This is a picture of our field on Cortez, and a little bit more on the harvesting of the flowers. So like I said, you only distill fresh flowers. The oil takes a few months to mature and age, and factors can influence the composition of your oil. So if you harvest or you're growing in an area where there's not a lot of sun, the oil content will be very low. The plant still flowers, but the oil content is low. If you harvest the flowers before they're mature, low oil content as well. Too much rain, the flowers actually fall off the stems, and that again is not really good for your crop. Never harvest wet lavender for hanging or for distilling. It gets moldy very quickly. And we are back to some more pictures of our field again. And pretty much, I think that is the end of my presentation. So I'd like to say thank you for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation and you've learned something new about lavender. And now I'll pass you back over to Lou for questions.
Wow, Judy, thank you so much. I'm really curious about what it is about Spanish lavender that you're not that thrilled about. And today I realized I have English lavender and maybe a little bit of French, but I don't think I have any Spanish. So what is it about the Spanish that you're not really jazzed about?
Well, when I've had it in landscape, it seems to be very fussy. Like they don't always survive the winter. And sometimes half the bush just dies back for no apparent reason. it's just not one of my favorites. I mean, it has its place, but everybody has a favorite. It's just not one of my favorites.
Well,
I'm prejudiced. I'm sorry.
if anybody should have a favorite, it's you, because you've grown so many different kinds. Judy, that was a great presentation. Thank you. I'm going to jump into the chat. There's a lot going on here. People are growing all kinds. A lot of people growing Spanish, people growing English, some people not knowing, like I wasn't absolutely sure until I saw your pictures. And Munstead, people with French lavender, someone with a variegated, mostly Hidcote. Is that how you sell it, or Hidcote? Hidcote.
So Lou, excuse me, how can I see the questions on my screen? So that'll help me answer.
You can see it at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There's an icon that looks like a little cartoon balloon, and it says chat. And if you click on that, everything everybody's been saying will pop up there. But I'm going to read these questions to you. So, unless you really want to get in there, you don't have to. Jan says, I don't know what kind she has, but it's kind of scraggly. Now let's talk about that, because mine is super scraggly right now too. And it looked like you said to do the pruning between October and February. Can I prune now, and how should I do it?
Well, this is where we might run into a bit of complication, because when you purchase the plant new, it's really important to start pruning it from when it's small, because of a lot of the older plants get scraggly. If you prune those plants hard, they might die. I would say start over. You won't get a nice compact bush from an old scraggly plant. Like the two just can't happen. You can prune the plant, but you can only prune back, to the green growth of this year. So you'll still have all those scraggly branches.
So because a couple of people on the chat, Judy, are really interested in the pruning aspect. And I think that's proven to be my downfall. I've killed quite a few lavenders by pruning back too hard. And now listening to you, I realized that I wasn't consistent enough in pruning, and I probably, that was my problem. So I will definitely start fresh with some of them, but some of them I think I can save. So are you saying if I cut back just into back about 2 inches, but stay in the green, that I'll be okay?
You should be okay. Yeah, make sure you leave some green. And I have seen this in landscape, some of the English lavender varieties, they send growth really low down on the stems. So you can probably treat it like a rose bush and cut out some of the older stems and hope to promote some growth lower down. So that is one option. I know the French lavender does not recover quite as well if you cut low below the green, but the English does have a tendency to recover.
Okay, well, I will try that. So the ideal time for pruning is October to February. Can you cut back a little harder during those months?
You can, but like most shrubs, after the plant is finished flowering, you can prune it then. It's just with the big commercial farms, they have so much to prune that they set a window for it.
Okay, good. A question from Jennifer, who's saying, does anyone know where to find pink English lavender? Are you familiar with the source of pink lavender?
I don't have a source. There aren't that many different varieties available in the nurseries here on Vancouver Island, and even in Vancouver. I've seen there's a white variety called Melissa of the English, but I haven't really seen any pink ones, and I don't have a source for them.
Okay.
But if I find anything, I'll certainly let you know, and then you can pass it on.
For sure, and just post it on our Gabbing About Gardening Facebook page. which is a reminder to everybody, Gabbing About Gardening has a Facebook page. We'd love you to show up. And this is a great way to keep your conversation going with Judy. But if you do have any questions that you want me to pass along to Judy, I'm happy to do that for you. So Judy, growing lavender from seed, have you been successful with that? Do you recommend it?
Yes, it's very easy to do. Some of the plants, if you leave the spent blooms on and the seeds fall to the ground, the next year they will grow. So it's quite easy. You can just sow the seeds outdoors in spring in your garden, and it should go. I
Wow,
haven't had any trouble with it.
really? That's fabulous. So harvesting your own seed from your own lavender, is that just the seed is in the tiny little flower?
The seed is in the calyx of the flower. I'll go back to my. So the seed is actually in the calyx, and you break that open. The calyx itself, that's where the seed is. But
Wow.
but like anything else, if you want a plant that's true to form, I would recommend cuttings instead of seed, because you might get some sort of variation in the variety, like a different height or not so deep a color.
Okay, good to know. I have had some success with propagating. I've done some layering by taking the scraggly low-lying branches and digging a furrow, putting it in there, covering it up, and waiting about a year.
That does work.
It's taken off. So yeah, I have found that a pretty useful way. Be nice to hear from other people and how they are doing with propagating their own lavender. Alyssa is asking for any tips on growing lavender in containers, Judy. She's a balcony gardener at the moment, and she'd love to grow some lavender.
It's easily done. I would recommend staying with the smaller varieties, the more compact English varieties, if you only have like a small space.
Which varieties would those be then?
So we go back to the English. There's a blue cushion, which is really nice. The Folgate, if you can find that, it's a really small variety. Munstead, the common one, that will work as well, but anything bigger than that, it depends on the size of your pot, right? But most of the English varieties would be good for container gardening. After a couple of years, you might have to take the size of the pot up, like repot it into a bigger pot. But most should work.
So some plants actually like to have their roots a little bit snug in a container, and I do also love growing lavender in a container. It seems like, especially in our wet weather, if I can keep it next to the house and have a little bit of overhang, it just seems to do so much better. Do they like to be a wee bit root bound, or should you try to avoid that?
That's a good question. I've never really grown them in a pot, but by looking at your plant will tell you if it's too root bound. Like if you get very little growth during 1 year, leaves start yellowing, like the plant will tell you that. That's, as much as I can say. I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure your plant will let you know that.
I like that attitude. The plant will tell you. I guess we just
will tell you. Plants tell us a lot of things. We just have to
have to pay attention. That's right.
Exactly.
I really like that. Now, you mentioned some degree of amending soil, especially if you have wet or heavy soil. So how are you doing that? I'm going to tell you what I did that actually had a degree of success. I actually gathered up some gravel, a little bit of gravel from the driveway and mixed it in with some soil for a potted one, and it's doing remarkably well, but I don't know how it would do if I put it in the ground. What do you suggest? How would you amend your soil if your soil's a little wet?
Just make a little mound or a berm so that the roots of the plant are not sitting in standing or stagnant water over the winter. When our water table comes up, your plant should not be sitting in water.
So actually build it up, lift it up.
Lift it up, lift up the soil. Yeah, just a little mound or a berm or something.
And make sure that the drainage is really good there. So maybe a couple handfuls of little pebbles, something like that at that point?
You can, but the most important thing to look for is, like, in the middle of winter, if your garden sits in water, just do a raised bed for the lavender. And I'm sure there are other plants who don't like to sit in water as well. They don't like to have their roots wet.
Mm-hmm. And what have you found that companion plants really well with lavender? I mean, I've seen some surprising combinations. Do you have any favorites?
I like to use it in more of a drought tolerant landscape with grasses, because it pairs well with that. If you put it in, let's say, it can grow anywhere. I mean, you can put it anywhere, but if you have it in a, let's say, a bed that with plants that are heavy feeders, I mean, it'll do really well, but it's better put out there where it requires less attention with the other things that require less attention.
That sounds good. That's
answers your question.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I forgot what the pH was. It was in one of your slides, but do you lime your lavender a bit? Or I have sprinkled a bit of wood ash on mine, but I tend to be really careful. I thought most Mediterranean plants like a little bit of an alkaline environment. Is that true?
The lavender prefers, it grows well, I guess, between a pH of 6 to 8. So when you're first putting the young plants in the ground, I would recommend a little bit of lime then and a little bit of compost, like for the first planting or the first year or the second year. But after that, the plant should be okay. I've found that our native soil around here, if you don't add lime or anything, the pH is as low as 3 or 3.5. If you just go with native soil.
Yeah.
So the lavender won't really do well in an area where you have, let's say, lots of ferns and other acidic loving plants.
Okay, so bring the pH up a little bit with some lime. And have you ever used wood ash a little bit around your lavender? Has that been successful?
I haven't on the farm, but I've just sprinkled a little bit in, like, the whole garden bed. So I don't really know if it's helped the lavender or not helped the lavender.
Well, fair enough. I'll let you know how it goes. This year,
Okay.
I unfortunately, and it's the first time I've done this in about 10 years, I just put too much wood ash on my brassica bed, and it burned it, and it showed it right away. Fortunately, they've recovered, but it was it was a great lesson, a great reminder that if you use wood ash, you have to use it very lightly and very judiciously. There's a question from Michelle here for you, Judy. Which variety of lavender has the highest amount of essential oil content?
That would be the French lavenders, all of the French. And the commercial growers in France, they grow the variety Grosso, which has a lot. Grosso, however you want to say it. That has about 3 times more the yield than the English lavender varieties.
Thank you. Also, Michelle's asking about the vigor of plants. Do they just give up after a number of years and need to be replaced, or is there a way to energize them? once they start to, as you say, tell you that they're getting old and tired?
Well, we come back to pruning again, because if you start pruning your plant from a very young age, it will stay shorter and more compact to the ground. Then, for example, if you have a heavy snow in the winter, the snow won't break the plant open. You know what I mean? Like just get inside and break it open. So maintaining that tight, compact shape is really good for the plant, and that will help prolong the life of the plant. When I went to the farms in Washington, I saw some plants that were over 15 years old.
Wow. And so pruning is really the answer to the best lavender you can get. And you know, this makes so much sense when you say it, Judy, because the lavender that looks terrible in my garden right now is all the stuff I have not been pruning regularly and well. So I feel hopeful, and I can see that I have a lavender shopping spree ahead of me.
Yeah, the pruning, when done properly, looks really drastic and harsh, but it's necessary.
Yes, I'm convinced. You have me finally convinced. Listen, we're getting some requests for that lemonade lavender recipe. Was that what it was? Can you pop that up on the screen for us, and people can copy it out while you and I keep gabbing after you do that?
Yeah, I can certainly
That would be super.
do that.
Thanks so much for this. I'm learning so much.
I can also send you a link with it later on.
Sure. And I will post it on our Facebook page, but if you can find it here now, a few people, there we go. They can copy it down. Yeah. It looks lovely and straightforward. Jennifer is making a comment about you need to use an edible variety. Are all varieties edible, or are there just some that are?
There's a little bit of discrepancy about that, but what I can speak to is all English varieties are used for culinary purposes. Some places use French, but in all the information that I've come across, it says only use English for culinary. So that's what I would go with. And there are actually some great books out there that involves lavender cooking. I can send a link later on if you want with a couple of those books.
Yeah, that would be great. Listen, we'll take anything you want to share, post it on Facebook or send it to me, and I'll put it on. I mean, I obviously people are crazy about lavender, and the background that you gave on it, you know, that it was actually used as a disinfectant, and just, you know, all of its medicinal properties are really quite amazing. I know a lot of people use it as a sachet under their pillow to help them sleep at night, making a tea as a relaxant. So one thing that you said in your presentation, it involved a comment about 2 to 2.5 inches. And I think it was when you were talking about pruning, that was about how far to prune it back, or was that like how far from the ground should you be going when you have a plant that has already been well pruned? I'm not talking about my gangly ones, but some of the smaller, more compact ones. How far from the ground should you be pruning it back?
Well, it's not really from the ground. You would gauge what you need to cut by looking at the last year's growth. So if you look at the plant, you would see the woody stems, which are the older growth. You look for the growth that you had last year, and that's what you cut back, leaving 2 or 3 inches behind.
And you'll see that new growth behind last year's too, won't you?
Yeah. You'll see the difference between last year's growth and the previous growth. Okay. The color is actually lighter and it's not as woody.
Yeah, okay, so I'm making sure that everybody's clear because there's a lot of chat about that one thing. So everybody, please be aware, you're not cutting it to 2.5 inches from the ground.
From the ground, exactly.
Judy is,
Don't
you know,
do that.
we have to make it very clear here because I think, you know, when you have a really lady lavender, you're tempted to just go crazy. But
Yeah.
Judy's explained it's not cutting it down that hard. So, you know, let's save the lavender, not the plant left after pruning. That's right, Melanie. So lots of great comments here about that. Someone's saying, I read somewhere that you need to put seeds in the fridge before you plant them out. This person wants to germinate in paper towel and in the pot. That's again, Michelle. Can you say something? Do you need a special treatment for the seeds before you?
You can just put it in the fridge for 2 weeks and take it out. But I've tried it and I haven't done that, and they do work.
It does work to do that, did you say?
It does work to put it in the fridge, and it does work if you don't put it in the fridge.
Okay, so either way is good.
Either way is fine.
But it sounds like you're really promoting the propagation as the best way to go.
It is, and it's actually very easy. It's easier to do the propagation than it is to fuss about with the seeds, like starting them inside. It's just in my opinion, we have more than enough things that we need to start inside. Like the house is so full at this time of the year. So if there's something that can be done outside, I would lean towards doing it outside. That's just my personal.
Yeah, I'm with you on that actually. And is this a good time of the year to be doing it?
Once the last frost have finished, then we can start with the semi-hardwood cuttings in the ground.
Okay. Define for us once again what a semi-hardwood cutting is. You did that quick little slide, and that was really useful. You said to make sure that when you make the haul, that so that you don't lose the rooting hormone when you put it into your potting soil. But if we could take a look at that again, that would be great.
Okay, so a hardwood is defined as growth from, previous years. So we're in 2021 now. So the growth you had in 2020 would be defined as semi-hardwood. And hardwood would be 2019, 2018. So if that helps with that definition. And softwood cuttings are if you don't prune the plant and you take the little growing tip, like the stuff that's sitting in the shovel there, that's the stuff that you would do inside under lights. Now, some of the commercial growers, they take the softwood cuttings and they start them indoors with heat in January in order to have plants from market. Whereas if you and I do the semi-hardwood in the ground, it would be much later.
And do you need a lot of light to get your propagated bits going?
Yeah, I've seen an operation where it's under light and there's fans, ventilation in the room. It seems like a big ordeal. But then they're doing it on a large scale for commercial farming. These are the farms that actually sell plants. So they want to have that plant big enough and bushy enough and ready for sale by like April or May.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. I'd say I have about a 50-50 success rate with the tip cultivating that I'm doing later in the year once it gets warm. Your photos were absolutely beautiful. Someone was asking here what kind of lavender was in the photo, but I think there were a couple different kinds, weren't there?
So yeah, so which photo?
And did you say English is your favorite to grow?
I like both the English and the French. The French is really beautiful because they have these they have these long stems, and then at the lower part of the stem, almost at the top of the bush, you get a second, like two little branches on the side. So the French has the main stem and then these two little branches on the side, whereas the English, it's just one single stem. Yeah.
And you're growing all three kinds at the lavender farm on Cortes?
Yes, so our field is English lavender, the variety Munstead and Hidcote. It's a mix of the two. But in the landscape around and at some of my own gardens, I have different varieties. I probably have about 15 to 20 different varieties of lavender that I've been accumulating with the hope of propagating and making plants to pass on at some point.
That's fabulous. So Paulette asked that question about what kinds of lavender you're growing on the farm. So thanks for that information. Sandra is asking what kind of white lavender you recommend.
English or French?
Not Spanish, gee, why am I not surprised?
I don't know if we have a Spanish white lavender. Maybe we do, but I'm not aware.
Well, go ahead.
For the white lavender English, there's a variety called Melissa. There's another one called Coconut Ice. I've seen that in some of the stores. And for the French, there's White Spike. And there's another variety called Edelweiss. That's German. I know I didn't pronounce it correct, but those are the four white that I'm aware of.
Okay, I heard all of them except the very first one. Do you remember what that was?
English, Melissa, and Coconut Ice.
Yeah. Okay, great. And again, if you folks didn't catch that, drop it in the chat line and we'll get an answer. Karen, hi Karen Hasselfeld, nice to know you're here with us. Karen is agreeing with you about Spanish lavender, Judy.
Oh,
you've got another. You have another I'm not a fan. She hasn't had much. She hasn't had much luck. It often dies and doesn't come back in the spring, but yeah. English always comes back, and I've had them for 20 years.
Nice. That's good to know. I haven't had any that long, so that's hope for me. Good to know.
Okay, we're back to another pruning question. And this is from Lynn. Again, just more clarification. And I'm glad you're asking this, Lynn, because I feel like I really need it too. When you're looking at a bush, is there a lavender bush? Is there a point at which you know don't ever go beyond? So for instance, never prune more than 1/3. Is there any kind of rule of thumb around that for pruning lavender?
Well, again, if the bush has like 12 to 15 inches of that old hardwood, right? And then you have like this year's growth 5 or 6 inches. Don't cut into the old hardwood. Stay within the 5 or 6 inches. Don't go below into the old 1 foot hardwood. So there isn't a standard rule like with roses or any other type, you know, you prune X amount, you take it back. So you have to stay within that last year's growth or you will most likely kill your plant.
Okay, well, we've heard it 6 times, folks. I think I'm finally getting it. I'll try not to ask that question again.
It is difficult to grasp because with anything else, when you're pruning, you look at the plant as a whole and you prune it and shape it. So with the lavender, you I wouldn't say can't, but you shouldn't really do that because you could kill your plant, and I don't want to give anybody advice that will kill their plant. So
well, I'll be knocking on your door looking for more lavender if I kill mine. No, you know, after our session here, there'll still be some sun. I'm going to head out there while I'm retaining the information. Michelle is asking, is it possible for a home gardener to make essential oil at home?
Hmm. Uh,
What about if you just put
a
all
good,
of
that's
your,
a good question. So I'll give you a little, a brief rundown on the distillation process. So we had these distillers that I showed here, right?
Mhm.
So this is basically what you would refer to as the pot, the cooking pot. So this lid comes off on top, and then there's a wire mesh basket in there. You put your lavender down in there, and it cooks to, I think it's, I'm not sure, but I think it's like 109 degrees Fahrenheit. Anyway, it cooks. And so basically once you steam distill that lavender, the steam goes up into a unit called a condenser, which has cold water running through it, circulating. And then the steam condenses back into a liquid. And that liquid goes down into something called a separator. And you have oil on one side and you have the hydrosol or water on one side. So I don't think there's any way you can make it at home unless you have a little distiller. And there are some really nice little distillers on the market used for all sorts of different essential oils. But
oh, really?
I think you need a distiller.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Now, what about infused oils? Can you put the lavender sprigs or the lavender blossoms in a dark colored jar and just put some light oil in it, and will it infuse? Can you infuse it that way?
No, because you need to heat it. You need to heat it to release the oil.
So if you heated the oil and added, I guess you could use it as
I
a,
don't really know. I've never tried it, so I don't really know, but I wouldn't recommend heating oil and adding lavender to it. Like I can't speak to that, and I wouldn't recommend it.
don't try this at home, kids, just because
Don't
Crazy Lou has
Yeah,
come up with an idea.
yeah.
That doesn't mean you should try it at home. Okay, good enough. I'm curious though. I think people can infuse like rosemary infusion with vinegar or
Mhm.
oil. So maybe somebody on the chat will have some experience doing that. Judy, Robin has a question for you.
Mhm.
Do you harvest when the flowers are blooming or after the flower has just fallen off? I think I know the answer to that, but you go.
Harvest for, so if you're harvesting your lavender for dried flowers, like you want to hang it upside down and dry it for decoration, it's recommended that you harvest the stem when 1/3 of the flower is open and
Okay.
2/3 are not. If you're harvesting for essential oil, you wait until all the flowers are open and basically the bees are kind of done with it. And then that's when you harvest for essential oil.
Thank you for that. A comment that, let's see who that is. She says she's growing her lavender in sand, in mostly sand, and having a lot of success with that. So that's nice to know. That's Jennifer Martin, I think, making that comment. So let's see here. Judith is telling us she has lavender plants that are a decade old. That's encouraging.
Nice. Nice.
Evelyn wants to know, when should I cut lavender for making sachets to get the strongest scent? And what is the best lavender for doing that?
Well, it depends on the scent of the English is what people refer to as sweet, sweeter smelling, more like a perfume scent. The scent of the French is very strong. They're both very strong, but the French has more of a I guess what's the best way to describe it? Like a camphor type smell to it. It's a very distinct difference between the two. So what was the question again? Sorry. When was
Oh,
the-
gosh, about the sachet, which kind to use and how long the scent will last, I think is what it was.
Well, whatever type you have, you can use it. And a few months, I guess. But a lot of times the sachet sits there and you don't really smell it. But if you just pick it up and you give it a squeeze, the scent is still there. So it really depends on what your preference is. And while we're on the topic of scent, some people can be allergic to lavender. It's a very strong scent. It's powerful, and it's also recommend that the oil, you don't use the pure oil on your skin anywhere. Like a lot of the oil that's purchased online is cut with a carrier oil. So the pure oil can be harsh. So be careful, I guess.
Oh, thanks for that reminder. It's powerful stuff, isn't it?
It is. And I know my guy, when he's distilling, like we have a very short window to harvest the product and distill it before we lose it. So there are times he's doing a shift like 9 or 10 hours. He distills at night. And he said, I have a hard time staying awake because of the smell of it, right? Because it's a sleep aid. So it's a very powerful thing. So just be careful how you use it and do a little bit of research if you're using it for something new for the first time.
It's beautiful. It's powerful medicine. It'll put you to sleep.
Exactly.
Don't have it in the car with you while you're driving. Karen is saying she's had really great success growing it next to stone walls. Is that because it's so heat loving, Judy?
I think it's because it's heat loving, yeah.
And Judith says, if you have straggly lavender, just whack it all back. It will recover. Trust me. Okay, Judith,
That's probably the English variety. And I have done that, and yes, it did recover, but it's not, I don't want to be the one to give that advice.
It's risky.
It's risky, exactly. Judy told me that I should cut my lavender to the ground and it's going to recover. No. but you know, with anything, experiment, take some risk. That's the only way we'll find out, right?
Yeah. It's all an experiment for sure.
Yeah.
So we have, can we talk about harvesting? This is from Nancy. I learned from a lavender farmer at Sequim that you must cut 2 nodes down, but how could the farmer cut stem by stem? Is the 2 nodes rule for reflowering purposes? So how about if we just start fresh and you tell us what the best way to harvest is? Thanks for that question, Nancy.
I'm not sure. I don't quite understand the 2-node rule.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Let's just, you tell us how you harvest.
When we harvest, I have a picture here that might explain. Okay, so this picture here. So we use a hedge trimmer to harvest. Because we have so much, we lay like there's a few different ideas, you know, you can do a few different things, but this has worked best for us. I tried it last year. So we lay a bed sheet down in between the rows because our rows are 5 feet apart. And then the guys go along with these hedge trimmers and you start one side of the bush, you just cut and it falls like this onto the bed sheet and then we collect it. So basically, when we cut, I cut back the stem, the flower, and the whole stem, but no green leaves. So that's what I would cut for harvesting. So you can see the plant here with the flower on it. Then the middle plant has been harvested. So you can see there's still some little stems sticking up. So cut back, just don't go into the leaf.
Okay, Yeah, that's a great photo. That really shows it really clearly. Thanks for that
I
question,
did it for
Nancy.
that reason, because it's a really
Yeah.
good comparison, 1, 2, 3 next to one another.
It's a fabulous comparison. Jennifer's asking about the seeds. Do the seeds need to be cleaned before you use them, or can you just scrunch up those dried flowers and throw them on the ground?
Scrunch up and throw them on the ground. I have some
Yay.
lavender in the landscape here, and it's on the side of the parking lot. The seeds fell into the gravel in the parking lot, and next year there were a ton of little babies just growing in the gravel.
That's fabulous.
Yeah. So.
Okay, we have Melanie making a true confession here. Warning, there's a little bit of off-colored language, but I'm going to read what she says verbatim because it's so great. Melanie says, warning. Melanie says, my husband got pissed off with my English lavender bordering and infringing on his grass each year. He hacked it back to nubs, and within 2 years, it was full and lovely as ever.
Nice.
Another hacking back story. Oh my goodness, that's a good one.
I think
Thank you for that.
They do respond to the hacking back. Because I have done something similar where I've had it in the garden and it's just too big, compared to what's next to it. And I didn't want it there, so I thought, this is wrong of me to say, but I didn't want to dig it up and kill it. So I thought maybe if I just cut it back, that's less severe. And it did come back. So they do respond.
Yeah, well, thank you for that story, Melanie. That's great. And Judy's saying, do so at your own risk, but you have done it, Judy, and you've gotten away with it. So we're all emboldened. Go ahead.
Well, I'm looking at this photo and I'm thinking about pruning and hacking back. And so when you prune, do you prune with clippers or is that some kind of a pruning machine in the foreground?
It's just a battery operated hedge trimmer, but we use that because of the volume we have. But you can just use like a head shears. You can shape it. Yeah.
Yep. But what is that called? It's called a
hedge trimmer.
Head spinner?
Hedge trimmer.
Hedge trimmer, Martha. A hedge trimmer.
Oh, hedge trimmer. Okay.
Yeah, because
that just shows up the difficulty in you, Lucretia, come across very clear, but Judy's voice is echoing and
yeah, we'll get it. We'll get it better next time.
Yeah, exactly. It just takes an effort to hear, and obviously.
Well, thanks for asking the question again, Martha. I appreciate that.
Okay, yes, I think that's very interesting. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Of course.
Judy, are people allowed to come visit you at the Cortes Lavender Farm? Do you offer tours there?
No, we don't. The farm is, I've had this question asked and I wish it were different, but as per the owner's request, the farm is private and not open to the public.
Okay, so Judy's the manager of the farm and she would have you if it was up to her, but it's not up to her. So just get all the information you can from Judy today, and we'll, you're recommending a tour of these lavender farms in Washington. I know there's some, I've toured one down in Langley that was fabulous as well. So there are other lavender farms. I'm just gonna see if I get,
I just want to say, like, a lot of people have asked me about visiting the farm, and it's not so much that we don't want visitors, but when you open the farm up to visitors, you open yourself up to a whole nother area of liability and insurance. And we're not equipped to deal with that. Like, we don't have that insurance to have the public and to have tours. It's just a whole other area that we haven't stepped into. So it's not that we don't want, there are more reasons than just want or don't want, I just wanted to make that clear a little bit.
Thank you. I was being flippant.
I know, but
yeah, that is an
good to
important
know, good to know,
consideration.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Opening your place up to having visitors is definitely another level of consideration. Thanks for
Exactly.
clarifying. Thanks for clarifying that, Judy. So someone is sharing a method for, I guess, distillation. Place a brick in a large pot with a bowl on top. Place the lavender in the water around the brick. Bring it all to a simmer. Put the lid on the pot, and the distillate will collect in the bottom of the lid and, I guess, condense and drop into the bowl. Wow. That's a homemade method, apparently, for distilling. Thank you to Jennifer for that. We'll try that out. And Yulia is saying, yes, lavender infuses really well in oil. Some heat helps. And she says, use a double boiler to infuse the oil so it doesn't ever heat. Ah, good one. So a double boiler, like you were saying, not to heat the oil, Judy. Any good oil will work, even olive oil. Thank you so much, Yulia, for that. Oh boy, another Jennifer, or another comment. I hacked mine back and it all died. Okay, I'm with you on that, Jennifer. I have killed more lavender than I want to admit. So we're coming up to a few minutes before 5. Judy, this has been fabulous. We didn't get to absolutely all of the questions yet, but folks, fire off an email or post it in our Gabbing About Gardening Facebook page, and we'll get Judy to answer any questions she didn't get asked. You're wonderful, Judy. Thank you so much for this.
Oh, you're welcome.
Reminder.
Happy to be able to share.
Thank you. Yes, it's you have so much amazing information. Your slideshow was brilliant. A reminder that Gabbing About Gardening is based on the gift economy. We'd like to share, we will share half the donations that come in with Judy for her time and her energy and her expertise. You can send an e-transfer to lucretia.shandbarber@gmail.com. If you don't get that down, just fire me off a private message on Facebook and I'll send you that address. Thank you for your donations. Next week, we're back again, Monday at 3:30, gabbing about growing herbs with Connie Kuramoto. Connie is a professional gardener and designer, garden designer. She's going to focus on a lot of medicinal herbs, including cannabis. So that's going to be a wonderful session next week. Same time, same place on Zoom. Judy, of all of the experiences that you've had growing lavender, is there any one that stands out most in your mind, or a use that you've found for it? Just some little goodbye comment or tip as we sign off here.
Some little goodbye. I would recommend walking through a lavender field at dawn, when the bees just start to come into the field, when the field is in full bloom. That's one of my favorite things to do.
And I bet you get to do it regularly.
Well, not as much as I'd like to, because when you're working, it's work. You come to work and you just go straight into work mode. Sometimes I have to remember to stop. But yeah, it's a definite experience just to walk around and listen to all the bees, and they fly, they pass so close to you, and you don't get stung or anything. They're doing their thing, and it's just nice to be in their space.
That's beautiful. So get out there, hang out with your lavender, listen to what it's telling you, and listen to those bees hum. I love it.
Definitely.
Thank you, Judy. We'll
Thank
see
you very much. Yes.
Thank you. We'll see you all. See you all next week, same time, same place. And again, if you have any comments to send to Judy, you can just fire it off to me. I'll see that she gets it. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you
Okay,
for
you're
showing
welcome.
up.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for gabbing. Judy, I loved it. It was
Are we,
fabulous.
are we off air?
No, we're still recording, so don't say
This is
anything
true.
you'll regret.
Yeah, I'm gonna get this Zoom thing right one of these days.
You did a great job. We'll work on your microphone and
Yeah,
it
I think that I might have to get another computer